Welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name is Carol. We've got a great program lined up as you can tell. But I just want to mention a couple things before we get started. We do have some other good programming coming up. This Saturday, the 24th, we're the television program on storm mitigation and that's going to be kind of community center at 10 a.m. So it's on Saturday. And then in October, we're going to take a look at the next presentation, 3017, and ask the question, are we winning the race? And how complicated somebody will answer that question. There's some surprising and good information. And then November 21st, of course, what makes them change? We're going to take a look at our funds. We may take them for granted, but we should. There's a lot of things. And then finally, at the end of the year, we're going to wrap up with our annual meeting and get together. So we'll have more information on all of those things. The meetings that are mentioned in October and November are here at the library from 6 to 7. The other event that's coming up that I'm particularly proud of is on Saturday night, September 28th, the school, our neighbor, is honoring us as an association. That evening, and we will be there with bells and whistles. Anybody who's not yet got a chance to apply. So I'm creating these out. Fill you in on the details. The other thing that we do after our monthly meeting, we started doing is doing coffee meetups the next day, very casual, as Jessica knows, informal get together over a cup of coffee, completely unstructured. So tomorrow morning we're going to be meeting at 10 o'clock at Black Sheep Bagels. So join us for whatever amount of time you can and just continue the conversation. It's a fun way to do that. And last but not least, I think most of you are on the list. I've talked to you, but if you're not, please join. It's a great way to stay connected with us and for us to be connected with you. So, and with that, I'm going to ask for Roberta Royce to introduce our speakers tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have such a distinguished panel tonight. But before we started, I wanted to just give you the background and kind of the lay of the land of where we are right now. In January of 2023, the Civic Association sponsored a program on BESS because there had been an application to install a BESS system. There was a lot of talk and concern about what are these. And so we held an interesting panel then. And shortly after that, Southhold Town enacted a moratorium on the installation of BESS systems. That moratorium is in place, I believe, until April of 2025. So there is time still to understand what BESS systems are and the role that they can play in our energy system. And that's kind of the job, the role, our purpose here tonight is to see what's happened in the last year and a half in terms of these systems and other possibilities. The state also is redoing some of their guidelines. And so you will get an update on that from Ian Latimer, and I think Paul will also talk about state and county issues related to safety that they've been looking at. The town board appointed a task force, a BESS task force, and they issued their report in April of this year. And that report there are copies making the rounds if anyone wants to look at it. I can pass out the link. And this is a draft report, draft recommendations, but we felt it was important to hear what our local community is suggesting and how that plays into and fits in with the larger county and state issues and what's happening there. So we will have Ian Latimer will talk about this state energy policies and where it's going right now. Jim Kennedy and Don Condoleezza will be talking about the task towards the end. They'll talk about the task force, specifically their recommendations and about safety and where these can possibly be located. Should the town board decide to go ahead with, authorizing the installation of BESS. A whole code still needs to be developed with respect to that. So we're a long ways away, but it seemed like tonight it was important to get more information about how this all works. And Bill Brewer is here representing fire departments, and he will be joining the question and answer at the end. We hope to have plenty of time for questions. So I'd like Ian to start off and let us know what's happening at the state level and what's been happening.
Give me just a second to switch this over. In the meantime, I will vamp by saying that I brought a box of chocolate arugula, which is on the table, and I have no intention of bringing that home. So if you would like some, it is there for you. Welcome you. Yeah. Sure. Out of curiosity, as we start, curious, how many of you would consider yourselves energy people? Man, what a crowd. I'm like accidentally an energy person. I don't know if any of you also identify as that. So I
Could you describe?
think if you knew and you raised your hand.
Any kind of itching.
I think if you're interested in the space, I did not set out in my career to be talking about batteries, but I think that like I think some of you, I found my way to the subject because it's really interesting, it's really timely, it's very important to be discussing, and so any opportunity to do so with interested people, welcome. Ian Latimer is my name. I'm a program manager with Clean Energy Siting Team at NYSERDA. If you don't know what NYSERDA is, you are happy maybe to live in a state that has an energy research and development agency, which makes you one of 3 or 4 states in the country that has a team of people working with communities and local governments on energy efficiency and renewables. The team I work on, our bread and butter is working with communities and local governments on solar, wind, battery storage, clean hydrogen, other technologies to try and help you prepare for projects, ask questions, understand what it means to have a project proposed in your community, and more importantly, understand how to regulate them so that we have safe projects coming into New York. So we work a lot on zoning, we work a lot on permitting, fire and safety codes, things like that. So very relevant. I was very pleased to be a part of this situation, or I'm sorry, the seminar that we did in early 2023. I don't know how many of you guys are repeat attendees, so apologies in advance for having to listen to me go on and on again. Happy to do that as well. A few things that I'll cover in my portion. A few things we'll cover in this introduction. Introduction to battery storage technologies, including the different types of batteries. What are the pros, what are the cons, how do they compare? Talk a little bit about battery energy storage systems in the context of the grid, which I know is a topic of great interest as we all try and understand, if you're going to have a clean energy transition on the grid, you at least need to know how the grid works to some degree. So we'll do some fundamentals there. And then talk a little bit about the state of battery storage in New York, including state energy policy planning, as well as incentive programs that are on the table. Given that we have a range of attendees, maybe it would actually be helpful. How many of you guys were at the session last year? A couple, many that were not, that's great. So we'll start at the beginning and kind of work our way quickly, but if there are some questions as we go through, we'll welcome them. So we can save some of the Q&A later for maybe more, in-depth questions for our colleagues from South Pole. Really quick, when we're talking about battery energy storage systems, starting from like the smallest level, we're talking about battery cells, which we all know. I have one in my pocket right here. All of you probably do too. All of our phones and electronic devices are powered by lithium-ion battery cells. It's a similar technology to what we're talking about as the fundamental building block of the systems. When you wire a bunch of those cells together, you get something called a module. When you wire those modules together, you get something called a rack. You stack a bunch of those racks together, you add in some balance of system equipment, such as HVAC, or monitoring and assessing equipment, or smoke and fire detection and mitigation equipment. All of those things combined together make a battery energy storage system, or a BESS. That's really what we're talking about here. Battery chemistries. All right, quick question. We all know that our cars have batteries in them, even our gas cars. Anyone know what kind of battery is in your car? Lead acid. I heard it quietly. Yeah, lead acid batteries, right? So we know that there are lead acid batteries. We know our TV remotes at home have alkaline batteries in them. We know our phones have lithium ion. There's a lot of different electrochemistries that comprise a battery. And all of those batteries are still fundamentally storing energy within them, but they have different pros and cons. There's certain use cases that different battery technologies are better or worse on. These are just 5 example variables that can tell you, when you might want to use one battery versus another. Maybe it's an issue of fire safety. Maybe it's an issue of cost. Maybe it's an issue of energy density, right? Like a lead acid battery in your car, pretty big. They're like that big, not much density. The lithium ion battery equivalent of a lead acid battery would probably be like that big. It's a lot more dense. Physical footprint, which again has to do with energy density, and then charging and discharging factors. So how efficient is it at recharging and charging? How long does it take to get up to 100%? How long does it take to get back down to 0? So as a result, we have a lot of different chemistries that have a lot of different use cases. In the context of battery energy storage systems today, we're talking about lithium ion. And I want to bring that home because there's a lot of things that lithium ion batteries are really good at compared to those other technologies. So all the way on the far right column, you can see where lithium ion differentiates itself from other technologies. We're not going to spend time on all of these. These are too many numbers, they're too small, too many cells. The high level takeaways to note are they're really efficient. They are really cheap to operate once they are built, and the costs for those systems are falling every day. They are at commercial scale, meaning you can go out and buy this technology today. This is not a pilot project. This is not a demonstration project. These are commercially viable systems. And space requirements, really small. You do not need that much space relative to other battery chemistries. When we think about things like hydroelectric dams, those are an example technically of an energy storage. Footprint of those, really big. Batteries, a lot smaller. It's not a great comparison, but just to the point of energy storage, looks different depending on the technology and sizing. Yeah, so that's why lithium ion is the prevailing chemistry right now. And I know that there's a lot of questions about, maybe you've seen an article about like a zinc hydride battery or a nickel hydride battery or iron air batteries. And you say, oh, that's great. We don't need lithium ion, there's these other technologies. Unfortunately, they're very early stage. Those projects are like pilot and demonstration projects. So a lot of the things that are driving innovation in the battery storage space have to do with safety. They have to do with the duration of batteries. So most lithium ion batteries are what they call 4-hour duration, meaning they're capable of discharging for 4 hours at a time before they need to go offline and take on new energy by recharging. That is not that much time, right? We know that on the grid, there are prolonged periods where you need 8-hour, 16-hour duration storage, multi-day storage in the wintertime. There are a lot of investments being made into long duration storage that would not be lithium ion technology. However, there's still a role to play. The comparison I would make is like, within like the gas industry, right? You've got a gas station, you've also got fuel bunker stations where they have, days, weeks, months worth of fuel. There's a role for both of those to play within a functioning, vehicle and gasoline industry. In the same way, we are storing a different type of energy, we're storing electricity. There's a role for short duration storage, there's a role for long duration. NYSERDA is actively funding R&D in the long duration storage space. We have an iron air demonstration project, we have a zinc alkaline demonstration project, technically 2 in New York. So we're an active player in the space, much like the U.S. Department of Energy and other research organizations. We are looking at and actively putting money towards those technologies. Doesn't change the fact that lithium ion is the prevailing chemistry today, is actively making a difference on the grid in parts of the country today, including New York. And that is why you're hearing a lot about lithium ion batteries. It's also worth noting, and we can talk more about this later, the lithium ion batteries, while they may have things in common with the types of lithium ion batteries in mobility devices like e-bikes and scooters, it's not the same technology. We're talking about highly regulated systems that are certified to code and standards versus, commercial products that you can buy on Amazon that get shipped in to a port and no regulator ever looks. It's not the same. It's not the same thing, and we can talk a bit more about that. In terms of where batteries play into the grid, I'll show some examples of different sizes and types of batteries in just a minute. But I'm just going to sort of throw a few on here, right? So you can have a battery that's being charged by a wind plant or a solar plant and then discharging that energy back to the grid. You can have a battery that's behind the meter connected to an industrial customer. Maybe they need backup power, like the same way they would with a diesel generator. They need backup power, so something between them and the grid in case there's a blackout or a brownout. A lithium-ion battery can serve that function. It's one of the reasons that hospitals and other critical care centers are looking for 24/7 available backup power, and batteries are one of the technologies that's being used for that. You can have a battery between a community solar project and residential customers. You can have batteries between a small business in the same way we talked about with industrial customers. You can have them even at the residential level, which we'll talk about in just a few. But the big takeaway there is one of the things that makes lithium-ion batteries so hard to talk about is that they can do a lot of different things in a lot of different shapes and forms. Some of those things are the same technology, sometimes they look a bit different. But it's important to think about this like as a pretty holistic thing, because when you're writing a zoning law for your town, you're writing a law that's comprehensive and it's going to address, a battery that's between a wind project and the grid the same way it would a residential system. So you need to be thinking comprehensively about technology. Won't spend much time here, but the idea there is, again, sort of within all of those places on the grid, batteries can serve a lot of different functions, right? So LIPA might be really interested in batteries because it allows them to defer having to spend a lot of money on new transmission lines or new distribution lines. Whereas I might be really interested in batteries because I'm sick of paying my highlight prices, so I want a battery in my basement so I can use the solar on my roof instead of having to, rely on the grid as much as I do. A lot of different services that we provide. A few photo examples I should have mentioned at the top with the other photos. Almost every photo of a battery in my presentation is a battery that is online in New York today. These are an exception because I don't put residential photos in my presentation. These are examples from the internet of a residential battery using technologies that are in service on Long Island today. Both of these are residential systems that are available on the market. These are two sort of small commercial battery storage systems that are on the grid today in Westchester County, both in the town of White Plains, or the city of White Plains rather. These are two larger commercial systems. One of them is in Yorktown. It is connected to a community solar system that's on top of a big box chain in a commercial center there in Yorktown. The one on the right is in Brooklyn, New York. I always include that one because it is about a 4-minute walk from my house. I walk by it all the time and I can say hi. Larger systems. Another one in the city, the one on the right is a 20 megawatt project out in Western New York, Glass Hill, south of Buffalo. The point is, there are projects of all shapes and sizes, different manufacturers, different permitting jurisdictions, different consultants working on these projects, in service, storing energy, adding it to in New York. Won't spend much time here. If folks feel like they have a sense of how the electric grid works, I'll just say that there's a difference between, sort of the big transmission lines that you see, often cutting through agricultural fields on their way to, load centers, city centers, villages, versus distribution lines, which are smaller lines that you'll see running along, your roads, delivering service directly to customers. The reason it's worth highlighting that is because the grid dictates where projects are possible. So snapshot. This is the distribution grid network here on the North Fork, and then we'll quickly overlay that with the high voltage transmission lines. So one of the things that NYSERDA is always encouraging municipalities to do and has been for years is to try and think a little bit like a developer when doing your comprehensive planning and your energy planning at the municipal level. And so you want to start by thinking, how do we overlay our zoning? How does our zoning interact with the grid? Because the grid is ultimately technical variable that can dictate where projects are feasible. If you're ever interested in these maps or other data resources, I have a stack of cards right there on this table. We'd be happy to zoom in, walk through this, but you can talk about how the grid works, talk about the implications for energy planning. But point to take away is that these are publicly available resources. And it also maps to where generation facilities are today. This is an example of fossil fuel powered peaker and other critical service providing plants on Long Island. You can see there's sort of like clear load pockets that align with transmission centers, like all of the transmission plants. I'll stop on this very briefly, not because anyone's interested in talking about California. I'm certainly not. But the reason I pause here is just to say, I think there's a lot of feeling sometimes when you have the first project coming through town and your town has never seen it before, that this feels like a brand new thing. We're guinea pigs for the first people that are dealing with these types of projects. This is a snapshot of the grid mix from California yesterday. You hear a lot about something called the depth curve, which is where California has way more solar than they know what to do with in the middle of the day. And so what they've actually done is they've built a battery fleet that's big enough to start charging using the excess solar during the day, and then discharging it as that solar is coming offline. And the only reason I pause here to talk about this is that yesterday, for a couple of hours in the evening, You had more energy going onto the grid from grid scale battery storage than any other asset type, more than natural gas plants, more than solar, more than hydropower, more than anything. This grid of the future that everyone's been talking about for a long time is actually happening in some places. Doesn't mean that California is perfect. I have no interest in continuing to talk about California and their problems. Again, I just wanted to say here that like, this is a real.
Maybe that's why they had a recent big battery fire there. Maybe that's why you don't want to discuss it, but you can go on.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about that.
You should talk about something and not make a Pollyanna about it.
I should have said,
Okay. All right, but you seem Pollyanna about this, so I just wanted him to address it.
Yeah, we can talk fires. We can also talk fires in New York. We don't have to go to California to talk about fires. The point being, there's a lot of storage. It's adding a lot of value to the grid, as recently as that's the charge. We saw that. So quickly, state of battery storage in California. There is a 6 gigawatt target of battery storage deployment in New York. And there are implementation orders that are coming this fall for public comment with the Public Service Commission. I don't know that anyone's ever been interested in talking about how to file comment and give feedback on implementation plans. I can help you navigate that. Again, got a stack of cards right there. We welcome feedback on those implementation plans from the energy storage team at NYSERDA. But that means new funding coming for residential battery storage, commercial battery storage, and large-scale battery storage projects. There is interconnection reform happening, so people are trying to get better about grid planning, which includes people who actually administer the grid in New York, using something called a cluster study. That's probably too technical to even have on the slides, but we digress. And then utility procurements, particularly on Long Island, you know, NYSERDA often acts as an incentive provider for projects elsewhere in the state. On Long Island, you also have LIPA, which is, you know, on a recurring basis procuring projects. So some of the battery storage projects on Long Island are directly going to be under contract with LIPA to provide essential services. We also talk about interagency fire safety working group, which was convened in response to 3 battery energy storage fire incidents, actually 4 incidents at 3 sites, which happened last year. Not trying to avoid talking about fire safety. It's a critical part of this conversation. Just haven't gotten there yet. So we can talk about the fire safety working group and the recommendations coming out of it. To that point, there were a series of recommendations that they made to the Department of State for inclusion in an updated fire code, which is taking public comment through September, I want to say 24? 24, Paul knows better than I. Similarly, again, providing public comment in a complex public service docket, no one's idea of fun. Happy to help you navigate that if you're interested. Staff your cards right there. Couple other very quick things in terms of state energy policy. Most notably, the one on the bottom. The governor recently convened a summit a couple of weeks ago in Syracuse to talk about basically, we know you can get so far with renewables and battery storage. What gets us to a net zero future? What are the other technologies we can put? So that happened a couple of weeks ago, which included discussions of clean hydrogen and renewable natural gas and other alternative fuels, discussions of next-gen nuclear facilities and other technologies. If you have thoughts, I'm all ears. It's not a wheelhouse that I spend that much time in, but I am always interested in folks' perspectives. So happy to talk about that. Would also say, you know, some of the other things guiding clean energy policy in New York. Clean energy and economic development have always been tied together in New York. One of the reasons that most manufacturing in New York, when they're moving here, looks near a hydroelectric plant in upstate New York. They want clean electrons. They want low-cost electrons. That's to get it. So there are, you know, new manufacturing and data centers that are coming to New York as a result of incentives and economic development conditions in upstate New York that are favorable, which is why there's a lot of solar going in upstate, a lot of wind going in upstate, a lot of batteries going in upstate. The reason I show this is just to remind us that, like, I think sometimes when you live in a place, it can feel like everything's being foisted upon you, and you're being asked to shoulder the burden of a lot of people and communities outside of your own. This is a statewide, you know, investment that the state is making in a lot of different technologies. There was another slide here that I don't know, but we're making a lot of investments in a lot of technologies all over the place. I'll also just note federal legislation is actively bringing millions of dollars to Suffolk County in the form of environmental and energy grants. That's happening today, including 5 awards so far from the EPA. So just want to say for those in, community energy planning, there's a lot of money out there from the federal government. If you're interested in how to access it, I'll stop pointing to my cards and if they're there. I'm happy to put you in touch with folks who work in federal policy. I feel like I've gone on at length. I'm happy to wrap there, but there's other slides about permitting and authority and all of that stuff. So happy to come back to any and all of that when it's time. So.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. Paul, do you have anything you want to add as far as the safety aspects that you've been working on?
And I'm glad you brought up, California. So a little bit about our company. ESRD is a safety company, with 5,000 people, all around the country. We have people in, Phoenix, Ohio, Boston, and California. And we look at different projects. I'm retired from the fire service. I work in the and I work on the battery energy storage system that coming into the city back. And the concerns that you have is often too, where they told us that they were going to put this in the house. Really have. And how not outdoors, into a building, with occupants. This is what they want done. So we really looked at the code and we became very technical. We reached out to people like NASA. We reached out to people, the military, common energy, and collectively we all came together and we tried to do some research. And we started to narrow down what we needed. Well, one of the biggest things that we wanted was they call large-scale projects. And for those who don't know, when you do large-scale projects, that's a novel in any kind of industry. You don't take your product and destroy it. These are million-dollar products that they have to destroy, right? They do what they call structure testing. It's done by the National Testing. We put in all these layers of safety to try to prevent the fire, but we still were not satisfied. Then we said, what happens if it fails? And that's where the large-scale fire testing came in. They're in the system, and we want to see what happens. So we work with people like Underwriters Laboratory, standard development organization, safety of products. We have a refrigerator in the house. That refrigerator has a hazardous material on the back. Refrigerator, that's considered a hazardous material. All of us have it in our house, and we feel comfortable. If you open up the refrigerator, you'll get spec plate, and you'll see there is a UL label saying that this product is safe to go into the house. We don't have to do it. Not saying it's perfect, but guess what? It is safe. You reduce the risk. You'll never eliminate this. I don't care who's up there for. We'll never do it. You have to reduce the risk as far down as possible. And that's what we do. So then something came up that was really important to the whole discussion. They started to tell us they use these in lithium-ion batteries in submarines. And immediately, that's what submarines, why take that submarine out of the water, go back and get some pilots. How you doing? So we started to, it can only go so far. And it's a lot of protection. But we grab some of those protections. And those protections that we read are now used in the national program, the state program. The big thing that we put in there, the military uses was this large-scale fire testing. Failure batteries, we want to know the result. We want to see what happens. And then after that, we started to massage the testing, which is a very technical job. I'm not a person that writes testing codes or standards. But when we first, the Underwriters Laboratory first developed this test, the battery companies were failing, and we thought we ruined the industry. Unintended consequences. We were totally concerned about it. But what it did is it actually got them to go back and redesign their systems to make sure that they can actually stop the propagation or the spread of the failure in the actual batteries. And that was the whole test was designed to, okay, we know it's going to fail, but we just want to limit the spread of the failure bringing on to the battery system itself. And That's what the state has adopted. They actually have grant this. And for those people who really want to do some research, it's called UL 9540A. That's the use. But that is the linchpin of safety. We look at not only prevention, but I'm sorry, excuse me. Not only but the prevention, but the actual limit of spread of the fire. Right? We'll get into, I'll get into questions, but I'd like to talk with, I got a whole list of things that we'll talk about. We talked about the one recently, right?
And
We'll talk about that. But going back, and it's a lot of technical stuff. I talked a little bit about this NFPA standard. We use this NFPA standard, for those who don't know. NFPA stands for the National Fire Protection Association. We deal with it every day in our lives. This building has all these NFPA standards. Any final one, that's an NFPA standard. It's the life safety codes that we look at. And we look deeper. We just had a meeting down in Atlanta 3 weeks ago where the committee came together. And we looked at it and we continue to refine. And sometimes we're leaving things the way it is. We're happy with it the way things are, or we're adding to it. For instance, this particular one we're down, one of the things I'm looking at now is battery on marches. People are getting innovative. Right now, there's different codes. Don't give any guidance to the local people on how do you actually get these things in the middle of the city. So this thing is constantly evolving. We tweak it here and there. We add and subtract certain things based on something that does it. But overall, the regulatory infrastructure that's in place for safety is quite good. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. I told you, we live in a world of risk. Over a bridge, there's risk. There's going to be risk. But we continue to reduce the risk. Now, if I can address the one in the back of your mind, do you know about for those who don't know, there was an incident that took place in Escobar.
Escondido.
Okay, good. And I'm glad that you come up, which is good. That system, there was a lot of stuff that took place in the fire service, right? That what they did is the evacuation. I'm sure you know that.
yes, they did.
Yeah.
5 miles, schools,
Yeah,
businesses,
yeah,
children.
And that is something that we looked at in the interview. And this is people that have studied this thing from the inception. 2020 was when the first code came out, but we were in work putting this together in 2018, 2019, but it came out in 2020. So you don't just come out in 2020 because it takes a long time to develop it. That was it. And we even looked at it on state level. The data, and I'm not here to knock this fire service guy, probably a great person who ever made the call on that, but the data just doesn't support any evacuations, right? We didn't support it. There was no one that was hurt. We had these incidents that took place in our own state, here in New York State. No one actually got treated for any type of stuff. And we had people outside the perimeter with monitoring equipment, monitoring for any toxic gases outside the perimeter. Nice to say, yes, there was to come out, but nothing that was what they call immediately dangerous for life and health. And get away from the point of origin of the smoke, it gets diluted further and further and further. Now, I was showing someone a picture, and we see this light haze all over the place. Did you see the picture of it?
Yes, I did. I have some right here.
Yes. And there was another fire that took place where there was a lot of black smoke and no one even knew about it. And this was in Ohio. It happened on the same day. And it's interesting to see that this thing was like, you would, if you put your hand here in front of you, you wouldn't have been able to see it, right? But this other one was a lighting. So again, it's up to an incident commander to make that decision. But we are looking at that by trying to give guidance to the fire service that you may want to do real-time data collection. And what we did in my old area in New York City, there's a very dense population, is that if people were starting to get hit with a little bit of smoke, they got out of the way, they went into the house, they closed their windows, they did whatever they needed to do. And we call that a shelter in place. I went around and I spoke to a couple of chiefs. I was a lieutenant, so I was not a chief, so a lot of them went on their shoulders to make the decision. But I asked the chiefs, a lot of them, how many times have you done an evacuation during the time? So they paused and they thought it was a trick question. Is anyone here from the fire service? No. Chief, have you ever done an evacuation
Maybe once or twice through the years, I'm a fifty member of past them. And, yeah, there's been a couple times where we had to evacuate neighbors, whatever.
Okay.
Not a big scale, but
Yeah, and it's a tremendous resource in order to, do an evacuation of things, but it's not even about the resources, it's about doing what we consider best is closing the windows and sitting inside the place, right? We do not want to bring people out into a contaminated atmosphere, we want to keep them in the house. That should be something that is just common practice. But that incident that took place in California, that system was before the codes were mature. So a lot of these systems that were put in before a lot of stuff that I just kind of mentioned were in place. They were put in before the codes were mature. The 9548 large scale fire testing didn't exist in the system. So the propagation wasn't there. But I've seen fires. I went to a couple. I went to the ones that we had in New York State. That fire, in my eyes, was successful failure. I was a successful failure because I never propagated outside the box. It stayed within the box itself. It did its thing, and eventually it went.
The flames,
Nope.
there are pictures of the flames coming out of the box though.
Yeah,
But he's saying it didn't propagate to the units that are
The
directly
adjoining
next. So the unit caught on fire, there was no propagation, the system was able to contain the fire within the unit. So that's-
Sure. Yeah, and that's what, yeah, thank you. But you're right, there was flames coming, but we stayed within the box itself. And again, that didn't happen in a couple of years.
could you explain the concept?
I'm sorry,
I raised my hand when you told them.
but I would like to finish the presentation.
Oh, okay.
And then,
So,
Dave
Okay.
Bergen will moderate the discussion because we're running out of time and I'd like very much to
Right back
hear
to.
from the task force people themselves.
yeah, and Ian was going over, we wound up kind of taking a quick look at what the state had implemented, right? And again, being an advocate for the fire service where I worked, for 25 years, we added things in there that we felt that, fire service needed because we went out and spoke to the fire service. We went out and spoke to certain people, not certain people, but we had interaction with them. What do you need? What do you need? And we tried to get that into the code as best we can. And you know what? Everything that we asked for is actually in the first draft. I was shocked that the Department of State, who actually develops the codes, we don't develop the codes with state. We may give them some guidelines. And I was shocked that they took all our stuff, even to the point of the person that needs to show up to help the fire service needs to be trained in incident command system. That's nowhere in the.
Paul, can I suggest we can talk more about the
Yes.
specific recommendations that
Sure.
are in the fire code, maybe as part of questions, but we want
Yeah.
to.
Sorry,
Thank you. Thank you. I wish we had a lot more time. This is, it's frustrating to have to push things along. But I do want us to hear from the task force members about what they have looked into and are recommending for our county specifically. So John and, Billy over there.
Okay. In the beginning of April, we released our draft recommendations, started to get grade those drafts, knowing that we'd be returning to it. And part of that return process was that we got community feedback. Second part of that was waiting on updates from the building of the working group, from the service side, understand what updates they would do. Those, as Ian said earlier, the draft fire code amendments, those changes were announced at the end of July 26th. I'll go touch on a few highlights then and jump back to what we did. In that updates, requires industry-funded independent peer review. Dispatch or qualified personnel in 15 minutes to arrive within 4 hours. Extended safety signage for fences. Removed fire code exemptions for battery energy storage facilities. Required, notably, was the best facility to be equipped with the emergency response plan. And that emergency response plan gave the new fire department, who would then be trained on the specific facility and how to respond to the incidents.
one of the last points that, of, of that was that it also required industry-funded regular technical inspection. Several of those notes, are what we try to incorporate in our draft recommendations. We wanted to make sure, that the developer, could build a facility and walk away from it during the period of the flight. So we sought to put protections in there that would include, ways that the safety could be maintained over a longer term perspective. What we also wanted is for the fire department to be, integrated and involved in the creation of those facilities. But we went a few steps farther than that, and we tried to look at the spacing of the units. When we were given the task from then Supervisor Scott Russell, we were asked to remain technology agnostic and not take a position for or against the facilities. And so we were there trying to give the town board insight into some of the best practices that we knew I could gather from sources that were available to us. All right, Jim here, Jim was the vital part of the task force that was modified. It was hopefully a task force and back to the part.
You know, I can say that, one of the end results here in the report that we produced, just try to pull information from everywhere on Long Island. Right? Brookhaven, East Hampton, Islip, you know, pick a town. A lot of the different planning boards and zoning boards started to put together their own research and their own, I guess, regulations around battery storage. So we created a table trying to look and say, what does spacing look like? What does, interconnect look like? What does water availability for fire look like? What do all these different, I guess, little measuring sticks look like as you line them up between different towns? You know, trying to just look for responsible, input that we could give to the planning board and zoning board and ultimately to Scott Russell and Trustee to his office. So again, what we did, we assembled a report. There was, I think it was total of 7 of us. Met regularly, we met probably every 2 weeks. We delayed the research, come back, distill that, and ultimately produced a report. We handed that off, waiting for next steps. Just a bit of my input.
Yep. And I guess the final part of the intro of our report was that we did want to include community feedback. This is one form. Other forms, either I think one of the better ways is to include a town board with some of that feedback. And I imagine, verify this, but I imagine the best process would be to submit that to the town clerk, who then redirect.
One of the first steps that we took was let's assemble a list of stakeholders. The fire department, the community as a whole, religious institutions, or whatever it is. We just assembled that list, that entire list, and then we made an attempt to try to engage them along the way. Developers, engineers, land use attorneys, all these different specialists. We took their input. Paul was part of that as well. So we really, I would say the one group that really never showed up to take a position was BESS. So, along the way, that kind of like stood out with all of us. It was a tough pill to swallow.
We really wanted to get the PSDG there and help us understand the need and build upon the slide with their load pocket that he called out in North Fork, and we want the PSDG to vary. What is this load pocket? What are we actually talking about in terms of capacity, both of energy and power? How long they need it, and what the ways are available to solve a load pocket. And all those questions remain unanswered.
Dave Bergen, who is also on our board, has volunteered to moderate the question and answer time.
I think we know where we start.
Well, hang on just a second, sorry. Yeah, we have the room till 7:30, not 10:37. So we have about a half hour of questions, and I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions. So if you'll excuse me, if somebody asks a question and then I ask a second question, I might go to somebody else first. So I want to give as many people the opportunity to ask questions as possible. You've heard of these folks. Bill Burr is Chief Touchdown Fire Department. He's here also, in case you have some questions at the immediate local level. So with that, I'll open up the floor. If you just start with just introduce yourself with your question. If you're not comfortable with last name, just first name is fine. And fire away. So right here.
Marilee, why Hutchins?
Thank you.
That's the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why Hutchins? Why
And who is that question for?
whoever is telling?
Well, let me,
Their staff.
oh, okay.
Happy to. I had that slide that had the grid up, right? And like I said before, we're always trying to get people to think like a developer to some degree. When a developer is looking for a place to build a project, the first thing they're looking at is the grid. They're looking at where are there, depending on the size of the project, where is there a distribution line, where is there a transmission line, how far is it from the substation, things like that. The moment they find like a pocket on the grid where it makes sense for a project, then what they start looking for is parcels or land that fits the suitability of a project on stage, right? So, if we're talking about a large scale solar project, they're looking for a big parcel, they're looking for flat arable land. They don't want to do as much tree clearing. They want to avoid tree clearing. They want to avoid prime agricultural soil. For storage, the footprint of these projects is a lot smaller, especially standalone storage. So for them, they're looking for available land, but they don't need all the same types of large, flat, pre-cleared land. So in a case like, the project that I believe Capture talked about last year for them, like they found a parcel adjacent to a brown field, which tends to be minimally invasive in terms of our sensitive environmental and agricultural lands. It was near a substation, it's near high voltage transmission where there is room on the grid. So that's what they did that. The only other thing I'll say in answering that question is it's not just cut jog. And that's kind of the point of showing, everything else that's happening around the state. Even here on Long Island, there's a lot of other towns that have moratorium. There's a lot of other towns that are adopting laws, and the reason is there's also projects proposed there. So it's not that cut jog is unique in terms of having a storage project. The better question may be like why that site in particular. That's a Capture question. But I hope that that's sort of helpful. That's like the perspective that developers will bring when they're looking for a development project.
There was a question, back to you first. And I'll come.
I think the question was already asked. My question was going to be a bit more detailed. I mean, this battery storage is all about energy efficiency. When you run it at efficiency, you're have to build new capacity, build new generation. We don't want that. Nobody wants a gas-fired power plant up in North Road and Cutchogue, right? But like I said, I will frame the question a little bit differently, and I think you alluded to it to some extent. This is a rural community, and they found a nice piece of property to put the storage facility. If you think about population density, we don't have population density, but western, areas west of us do. In that sense, aren't they the greater beneficiary of the storage facility that this developer is proposing to locate right in rural farmland, Cutchogue? So I mean, if you think about relativity, we're getting some benefit in terms of, what it goes to our electric bills, but we're a small community. On a relative basis, this is really more helpful to people further west.
I think that's a great question. I'm happy to keep going unless someone else wants to speak to that. A few thoughts. It really is a great question. The first thought I would have is, for better or worse, electrons are pretty non-discriminatory. They do not care whose light bulbs they're powering, they just know that they need to go power something. That is the funkiest metaphor or like way of describing the electric grid I can give you, but the point there being, electrons that come on the grid in New York City, they are being used in the closest place. Electrons that come on the grid here, they are being used in the closest place. That's how the grid works, right? Like think about, if I pour a cup of water into the Long Island Sound, here, does that water go there? Does it go here? Does it go there? It's not really work like that. They serve, the closest demand first. And so those projects, you could make the case that for, you look to your left, you see greater population density, you think, well, it's all going there. They're also building batteries there, a lot more than they're building here. There are actively multiple projects going online in New York City, the size of and bigger than the projects that we're talking about. So it's not really an us versus them issue with the grid, much in the same way that you're currently getting power from somewhere else. Electrons are transferable. They don't only live in the one place. Your first point about storage being related to building new generation, you're right that we don't want a new gas plant down the road. Doesn't mean we're not building generation. We have new solar, we have new offshore wind, we have new onshore wind upstate. There is new generation coming in, and it's generation that is very complementary with battery storage projects. You're right that we don't want new fossil generation, but we do have new generation coming all of the time. So just a different technology.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if either of the gentlemen from the fire service could explain the term thermal runaway, which many of us heard for the first time when it was explained to us why you can't put out a battery fire with water. Okay, sure.
Yeah, and thermal runaway, a lot of people think that thermal runaway is described as actually propagation. Thermal runaway is when it builds up so much heat that you can't dissipate the heat quickly that it actually will affect. That's technically the definition. So if the cell is heat, then you can just kind of come out the cell quicken, it will actually, that's thermal runaway. What we're concerned about is the heat transfer from one to the next cell over. That's what propagation. And that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, we know that there will be thermal runaways going on. So it's going to be issue. We just want to make sure that we don't have the competition. You guys want to know when there's a thermal runaway and say, just think it's what we do.
Does thermal runaway explain why the California fire burned for 11 days?
Yeah, because there's a lot of root cause analysis on what the book, right? I don't know what the book is about. Was it a different component that wasn't regulated properly? It's probably about one that's been rotated.
Same thing. Yes.
Yes, we will.
That's
That's gonna be the,
that is,
it's the same.
yeah, because there were two. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, the one that you yeah, so what happens is if the fire, right, if we have that heat that takes place, you could have it transfer to another cell, right? That cell is damaged. It could be it could take a while for it actually to begin its own cell. And we've seen that is a data that's collected again. What we looked at in this UL testing, that is the product testing, large scale fire testing, that's the stuff that we're trying to then put in place. So when they do this testing, one of the criteria they keep is not only the shut the testing, but then they have eyes on 24 hours to see that there's no issue. And that's part of the testing criteria.
Quickly two notes to
Real quick.
Want to get funny. Absolutely. The first one was to say that I think that, when you look at an 11-day timeline, the immediate thought in my mind is we can't have our volunteer firefighters on site for 11 days, right? The nice thing is with these code updates, we're talking about the dispatch of emergency response funded by the developer or the owner of the project, say. The intention here is to have experts that know this technology that can monitor and respond to incidents on that longer term basis, so that it's not solely filtered by our volunteer fire service. We want them working with people that are paid for by the owner of the project to keep an eye on this.
And how quickly do they have ideas?
Hang on. As he said earlier, dispatched within, I believe, 15, 20 minutes, on site within 4 hours.
That's one guy. Okay. So, yeah, there's clarification, you need to be, they need to be, on the phone with the team. And with the incident command, they need to show up. So there's a whole mechanism in place. We did this in New York City. I don't recall on Saturday and Sunday on some of this, but we apply upon that along. We go in, we look at the battery management system, we look at the safety of the battery, nothing's showing, nothing's going on. We take a look at closed circuit TV, and then sure enough, we can get this command. Look, we have nothing showing, there's no coming in this thing, say the health of the battery looks good. You guys can do it. So without even showing up, we can do this all over the phone. If there is an this incident plan to happen. And that's what we. That's kind of doing.
It gives me an idea that he has 4 hours to get there, and a lot can happen
So
when you've got a thermal runaway situation in 4 hours.
It's an important question, but I want to get other questions also. We have time, we'll return to this.
Hi, Helen. Can you describe the systems for, risk mitigation for the fire and fire suppression systems that are built into this? I mean, I'm assuming that there's like some
it's great.
fire,
Related to safety. Related to safety. So, related to safety, right?
yeah,
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we look at them, so and the cell, right, they have to be listed, so it's a performance criteria that we need to know, so each cell, we can make sure that they have a list. Like 16.2 is a UL standard. What we're seeing on some of these products that are going on fire in the consumer market are not listed that. These are counted batteries coming in, so it's, I sit on the farm transportation, I look at my attitude, we do that's the key. You're in supply chain, and now seeing the results of that. Those cannot go into these battery resources, cannot be listed as. The next thing is after you get that, the blue of these cells go into the module. The cells and so module, the one that is free, which is now we actually fed a cell inside the module itself. And the last thing show single cell play show there's no population. And then finally, what we do is we go through another list. We look at the system as a whole. So now we have 3 listings building up, right? Building up constantly. And now we look at making sure that all the systems are working together in conjunction. The performance criteria on that. And then finally, we have another thermal management system, pull these things down, you ever kind of put your battery out in the sun and it actually shuts down, and that's where everything comes in. That's each one of the things to the batteries. And then finally, we have what they call a battery management system. Guys, it is crazy system. So the battery management system will actually constantly look at. I look at it every day on sites that we have to make sure they stay healthy. Good to go. And if they do recognize that there is something outside the parameters of safety, it immediately shuts it down. It stops charging and discharging the battery itself. And it will send out a ticket for people to come fix it. And we know they're going to come fix it. Now remember, I'm on the fire side. We know they're going to come fix it because the people that own these things that make money, they want the optimal performance of these assets so they can make money. Let's face it, they're in business. So they have a vested interest to make sure that these things are working really capacity so they can make, any type of, I hate to talk about money, but let's face it, that's what it's about. So they have a vested interest to make sure, and this is other stuff that we put into the code, make sure we put it, explaining that. On making sure that these people are not only checking out from that point, but actually getting to the site, making sure they're doing the proper maintenance and operations. Standard of care is a big reason why we lose some systems too. People are not checking, so standard of care is out there. The state adopted that. One of the first NFPA program doesn't even have that. They're making people go there. Third party makes go there and send something to the local jurisdiction and say, tested this, they tested that, and all the different criteria. I think to make sure that that is another way of safety where we look at the performance of the system properly.
Part of the question I heard was what type of built-in suppression system is in these units, right? And so
Okay.
that is your answer. So what is required suppression systems
I'm
that are
sorry.
required for these folks to put in?
Yeah, for the gas trial, there are no suppression system required. The gas trial system, so we try to rely on the 9540. What we did know is that if you do put a suppression system, right, whether it's a clean agent or if you use water, for instance, we know that water got in some systems and actually caused the fire. Yeah, so do we want these things going in prematurely and causing a fire when we're trying to go on? So suppression system, now this is something that is in all NFPA standard, it's the International Fire Code standard. All top experts recommend no suppression systems. And some people are putting the clean agents in there, which is basically an aerosol system in there. There's no data to prove that the aerosol system is going to do anything beyond. We don't need to think about it.
There's also like venting requirements. So a lot of stuff in the fire code, I'll very quick, is based on the technology, right? So like there's a table in there that says, is this a nickel cadmium battery? Then these are the things. This lithium ion, this is what we need. So for something like a lead acid, where you have a liquid electrolyte, you need to plan for spillage. You need spill control. For something like lithium ion, they have what's called deflagration venting requirements. Now there are air control requirements. So if there is any kind of buildup of, potentially explosive gas or anything, the system is prepared to respond to that to alleviate that. So there are more technology specific system requirements that.
Yeah.
But so with respect to an event of a fire, there's hundreds of thousands of gallons put in some events to mitigate. Has the state given any guidance with respect to capturing this water? Because it's a toxic substance. It's infused with a lot of different chemicals. So has the state done anything to capture any of the water to prevent it from dissipating? We live in an aquifer, so it's eventually.
It's an excellent question. It's a great question. Yeah, it's one that I think kind of plays incident response writ large, right? Control of water for things like structural fires and vehicle fires, also a tremendous issue. With respect to lithium ion, there hasn't been enough. The volume is not something that we did with standards going forward. The state has done is looked at the incident happened in New York. And they've done air and water and soil testing at the site where those projects caught fire, including the one in Wisconsin. Nothing in the soil monitoring data that was of particular concern. Happy to send you the link to the report and or put you in touch with the folks more involved in that.
What I understand, the soil testing was done 2 months after the event, so.
I'm not sure of the exact timing, to be honest. I believe. What did you say?
He's right.
I'm sure he is. I wouldn't assume otherwise. Anyway, I can't speak to that. What I know is the testing they've done thus far has indicated no concern. I think that Paul can probably speak to some of the water control at that time. But as of now, the state does not have restricted guidance for like lithium ion batteries specifically for fire. Question right in front.
Yeah, I'd like to ask our fire chief, how comfortable do you feel with the idea that we may have a number of these battery storage systems in our area? How comfortable do you feel in terms of you and your capability to manage the fire, to look after them and whatever?
I think, the best answer is that right now, it's still an evolving process. Us as the respondents, we're trying to educate ourselves as much as you are as the public on whether or not this is good for us, or more importantly, as our end, how we're going to handle it when it goes after the fact. This do happen for small, large, or whatever scale of dealing. Some of the concerns we do have is water supply protection and different things, given our area where we are. We don't have hydrants in our entire district. So being able to fight these fires or supply the water to fight these fires You know, it's one of our primary concerns, you know, we deal with the what ifs, you know, when it's gonna happen, what can happen, you know, and how to properly deal with that, you know, in the event it does happen. And so, our firemen are preparing for it, over the past couple of years, several courses, training sessions, with fire academy, state, and all different levels, that we can try and educate ourselves on how to properly respond when we do happen, large and small. And that's, you know, some stuff that he's, been sharing information, and, you know, a lot of his colleagues and sharing that professional information requirement too, to educate ourselves. Norm Riley, he's a part of the South Chiefs Council. And he's on with all of us fire chiefs throughout South town with this task force, sharing that information, trying to come up with a plan and recommendations for this. So we've all been involved in this process, all along at some level, but it is ongoing. And, you know, some of the questions asked, we just don't have some of those answers yet. To try and get those and work those. A lot of concerns we can share and try to, you know, get those addressed.
Jessica Lee, I'm a stakeholder, I live in here, homeowner. Who pays for, as great as our wonderful volunteer fire departments are? I come from a big firefighting family. We have 5 firefighters in my family. As terrific as our volunteers are, who pays for the specific complex technological training to handle these things? Does it come out of our pockets? The corporations, the owners that are pushing these systems do, to the government, who pays for it? And how involved is the training?
So, it's a great question, and I think to date, it's varied from place to place, which is one of the problems that will be addressed with this fire. So Paul's, fire safety working group, which can speak more to the specifics. One of the recommendations that's currently proposed to be added to the fire code is that it requires developers not only to pay for the training, but to train people on site at the specific installation, right? So it's one thing, you know, I'm sure that you've had mixed feelings about some of the trainings you've been through where you're sitting in a classroom, you're looking at slides like the ones I forced you to look at for a while. It's hard to translate that to the real world, right? This fire code would ensure that developers on an annual basis or project owners on an annual basis are funding on-site training. You're working with, you're touching the equipment that you would be responsible to in this thing. So it's not coming from your pocket, it's not coming from the town coffers. It's paid for by the project owner and it's done on-site.
So it sounds like a sporadic, it'll be done on us and as needed. It's not gonna be like an ongoing, changing, learning system as all these systems evolve and fail or fall forward. I mean, who really oversees that? I mean, I think like developers all love to talk about, we're going to put in the traffic systems, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And ultimately, if a government doesn't have specific authority set up to really monitor and count the hell out of this, I think we don't really know what happens in these situations.
So a couple of thoughts. One, I would say annual training is anything but sporadic. So right now, you know, code enforcement officials, building officials, they've got their in-service requirements. Every year they have to do trainings to be in good standing with the Department of State, with their codes people. We're talking about the same thing, right? Annual is part of your life. Once a year, you get your refresher on what it means to respond to an incident at this specific site. So I would make the case it's not really sporadic, it's quite scheduled, it's regimented, and it's, you know, very applicable to the system in front. Yeah.
And so, yes.
Hi, this is for the committee, this is for Chairman, John, is it? John. Okay. The Friends of Oregon Road, really, I mean, Alex is not here, she's traveling right now, so she and I have been in touch. But you talked about stakeholders being involved, or you get contact with stakeholders. The Friends of Oregon Road really feel blown off by this, and you have NYSERDA sitting in the room, and they are not unbiased. They have I mean, I have nothing against you personally, sir. But I mean, you have a stake. I mean, let's face it, you came here knowing all of your cute little things to say and how to endear yourself to a crowd. But like the Friends of Oregon Road, where stakeholders were not included, their comments were really not included in the report. So what are the plans going forward? You say you're waiting for certain things to happen to get community input and people like this who have concerns, whether it be fire, construction, or siting, or payment of training. I mean, what are the plans to get those people who live next door to this, in addition to 5 miles away, where they were evacuated 2 weeks from their homes in California, involved in putting something like this together?
I think the first thing is, give civic written comments regarding the draft recommendations, get us to the town clerk. When we began this process, our understanding was that if we did not develop a code for the state as a whole, could force it.
Right, could impose one on you, yes.
And that was our worst fears going on. And so as the process evolves, the town board will be deliberating on this. So they need to have those towns in front of them as well. So get that to the town clerk, as soon as you can, to make sure that when it comes on to deliberate, pros and cons are.
Are there more like public hearings or public forums? This is an educational forum, but
Town board has to set those up. Like, we
Yeah.
submitted the report, they have to take it from there. But I can also jump in, okay, if you don't mind it. You know, when we started, when we all first got together as a task force, you know, I was doing a 4-inch final. Some of the information that South Board was able to pull together. We also had the report that was put together by Frank Ford and Road. A lot of good information in there. So we took all of that and kind of distilled it into this report. And again, I think what John was saying, the process is, you know, we're just sort of, you know, we were given a timeline. Let's do our research and try to put together good recommendations as a group. We've done that, and we're kind of, you know, just sort of waiting in the wings here to be re-engaged. If we're not, you know, depends on, you know, this new administration who Scott started this, you know, how we got it. So,
I think and to help you out, question, I wasn't gonna put anybody on the spot, but I saw a hand go up. And, if you'd like to introduce yourself,
Yeah,
so
sure.
that
Hi,
people know who
everyone.
you are,
Jen
and then
Smith.
you can.
Really here to listen and learn and make sure the town board is hearing. Since I wasn't on the town board when your task force was formed, but I did listen to several of your presentations, and I could not be more impressed with the quality of commitment to this kind of a task that just who's on your task force, and the work that you produce is really valuable. Thank you. 'Cause I know that's all volunteer time, just as our firefighters are all volunteer. And this is really what the town is about. And I'm sure you hear this when you go from small town to small town, teaching us about the partnership with New York State. So we have a moratorium in place. We have a significant zoning update project going on. This is part of that, with overlays and all the different things that you shared with us. And we certainly will be seeking guidance from the state. So right now, it will be re-engaged, but we're gonna get through this zoning project and see where it fits into that bigger puzzle. And really no codes get in place without public hearing and more public engagement. Thank you to the civics who are always bringing these really critical topics to the town. And then our state legislative partners really need to be working with us, and I'm confident that.
So,
And there's always a point in every town board meeting at the end where you can speak to anything not on the agenda. So please also feel free to that if you have concerns that you feel like we're not getting too fast.
so I don't know if your question was answered, but I know.
It was.
Perfect, thank you. I know you already asked one, so I just want to see if there's anybody new. Yes, sir.
My name is Bill. If I might, I'd like to offer a couple of enhancements to some of the conversation, just to, in exchange for being able to.
Okay, they can be brief, because we only got about 10 minutes left.
Your pursuit of road information for the Southwood River North Pool shouldn't be aimed at like it's contract. PSC doing all the contract. Aim the question is like, whom I work with every day and have serious concerns with the work of the city. Those senior executives would be very pleased to follow. That's number one. Number two, to further enhance the response with regard to why cutoff. Likely change, appropriately change the rules of engagement for facilities to interconnect with their grid. We as ratepayers no longer pay for those facilities to connect to the grid. Now it's the developer that must pay for the connection. So when it comes to why cutoff or why themselves, and the answer was by Ian, where is it? Where are the sites that are best situated closest to the grid? Therein lies the answer. You know, where are the closest compatible sites that could comply with this? And what is their proximity to the grid? Because the project has to pay for it. And so my question is, have you thought about a second dimension to your recommendation? Have you mapped how many sites might survive these recommendations that can be done at South Pole? My sense is that's it. So
Let him answer. Okay.
So have you?
That was a. We deferred that responsibility back to the town, and we have specialists. Because, there's no sense to do, that's volunteers. We did, have an enabling or kind of outline our recommendations, put into a full measure to prohibit most of the noise work. But we got the GIS data to pull out those skill players outside of our.
So it sounds like it's gone to planning department, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's it. I just wanted to make sure that the question was fully answered, that it's gone back to the planning department. And I imagine it'll be part of the, also what the zoning advisory group is talking about with new zoning, revamping of zoning in South Town. So I don't want to speak to the town board members because I'm not one, but that's my guess.
I had noticed that when you're developing the restrictions or trying to think of the constraints that are unique to Northport. One of those critical avenues being that, especially the expensive eastern part of South Northport, there really is only one road and one road out. And so any fire that shuts down that road shouldn't be a disaster emergency, because normal instead. Disaster always happens when it's a 30-mile long wind from the north, and the winter. It's one of our thoughts was all like you brought up. There's so much constraint.
Yes.
I'm Bill Riley. I represent the fire service as South Township's Council Vice President since the inception of the task force. And just one thought for everybody to take away is anything that happens here, any problem that comes up, the volunteer fire service in this town is going to mitigate that problem. The town can't do it. The fire service has the equipment somewhat. We might need more. The training is in the proposal that's required, but it's going to be your friends and neighbors as volunteers that are going to take care of that issue if something happens at one of these facilities. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's not going to be professional people that are going to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with it as volunteers who take care of a lot of emergency close stuff that didn't happen. So it's just something everybody should think about.
And if there's equipment that you need, you make the project developers buy it for you.
It's in our proposal, John, right? We put that in there. I made sure that was in there. So the town has got a good basis to, go forward and, see what happens with the code that they develop and pass.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. I don't live in Cutchogue. I'm actually here from another town, Southampton town. I'm a councilman in Southampton. My name is Tom John Scavone. I am actually running for a state position. I'm not pitching you, but I'm here to listen to the community and to see what Southold is doing. We are in our third moratorium. And I just want you to know that, these conversations are happening all over Long Island, including in our town. And we have a task force that is working, to create new zoning in the town of Southampton that's gonna come to the board as well. So I definitely appreciate the Cutchogue Civic Association, for having this meeting. By the way, I was here last time for the septic savvy citizens. Right. So, and this one's good too, and it's an important topic.
Thanks for coming.
And we all know, if you read the local papers, Riverhead's been going through this in the last year also. So I think it's obviously not unique to Southwold, always been dealing with the same issue. Trying to come up with code to cover this. One more question. Hang on. So you already asked a question. All right. Is there anybody who hasn't asked a question who has a question? Yes, sir.
Hello, Dave. I'm Fred Anderson, longtime Cutchogue. I look over America when I'm flying across the country, which is not that often. I see solar panels and wind generators. And it's wonderful. It's going into these battery packs that'll run at night. Sort of what you're talking about. Now, in Cutchogue, what is the expanse of this project? How many acres we talking about? And are you just going to be storing energy for the power lines? Or are you going to be creating energy on the site?
Regrettably, it's not my project, so I don't know.
Oh.
I work for the state government. I don't work for the developer.
Okay. Anybody have plans for this?
There's no generation.
Okay.
When it goes on site, it begins as a load. It needs to be charged.
Yeah.
And then, it stays there, it's dispatched.
But it might be useful just to say how big the proposed Oregon Road, project would have been. So how many of these containers would that have been?
I think it is, each container is about a megawatt, right, so they figure about 140 of them.
140 containers.
Correct.
I thought I just heard somebody say 60 in the back.
60 maybe.
So we can certainly get that answer. I'm sure that there are project applications that have been filed with the town. I would imagine you could ask your representative in the back or others, and they'd be able to get that.
I just finished. How much, so 60 minutes would take up how much land?
Many.
104 acres. 4 acres and
Or 4 acres.
Just to get a sense of the scale.
the size of
It is now 7:30 and we told the library we've done at 7:30. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but it could very well be if you have an individual question, some people want to hang out to answer a question. But first off, I would like to thank all the panelists here. Some who traveled quite far. And I want to thank all of you for showing up, because it's public input. You keep hearing about it, you keep talking about it. It's so important. And I know I can speak for all the civic associations. It's a coalition of civics. And when we have these type of forums throughout the Southwold town and the different villages, we talk about them with the coalition. And then we talk about them with our elected representatives. So we're also here to help channel the feedback from these forums through our elected officials. Thank you.
And just a reminder also, 10 o'clock tomorrow, if you want to keep talking about this, at the Black Sheep Bagel Place, near Broad.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.